Greeting everybody. In this video, we are going to explore examples and areas of pronunciation teaching that teachers should focus on when teaching pronunciation. Firstly, let us review what we did last week in the first part of our lesson. All of you did an amazingly impressive job in exploring your own respective points. We got to explore the issues in pronunciation, which are mainly because of the fact that teachers don't want to teach pronunciation, they aren't sure with it, or think that students will adopt pronunciation as they learn the language. With that, we also looked at the benefits of pronunciation teaching, how it helps students with communication, conveying messages clearly, and understanding what is said to them. We also discussed the goal of teachers in pronunciation teaching. Should we aim for perfection, where students should sound like a native speaker or close to it, or should we focus on intelligibility, where natively-like accent isn't the focus, but rather the ability students have to make themselves understood and to understand people? We also looked at what problems students have in pronunciation learning, such as not hearing sounds correctly, not being able to produce sounds despite hearing them correctly, or not being able to display correct intonation. We discussed whether phonetic symbols should be used or not. We looked at when to teach pronunciation, which Group 5 did a really good job on that point as well. And helping individual students is important as students have different problems in pronunciation. So these are the main points that we discussed last week, and I would like to say thank you to all the groups as well for doing a great job on these. In this second part of the lesson, we have 5 separate areas of pronunciation teaching that teachers should take into consideration when teaching pronunciation, such as working with sounds, working with stress, working with intonation, sounds and spelling, and connected speech and fluency. When working with sounds, it is important that teachers focus on one individual sound or one particular sound at a time, because this gives teachers the opportunity to illustrate to students clearly how the sound is made and how the sound is spelled. Now, the reason why one sound should be focused on at a time is that English language lacks what we call a one-to-one correspondence between sound and spelling. So what is it exactly? To analyze that, I'm going to use examples from our own language and compare them with English. Now, in some languages like Khmer, there's a strong one-to-one correspondence between sounds and letters. This means that for every sound, there's usually one specific letter, and that letter always represents the same sound. This makes it easier for speakers of Khmer to learn how to pronounce words based on their spelling. So let us look at some examples from Khmer to show how consistent the sound spelling correspondence is. So the sound K is represented by the letter G. So this letter always makes the G sound, right? G has the G sound. For example, in the word gat. So you have the G sound to form the sound gat. The sound T is represented by the letter T in Khmer, and again, this letter consistently makes the T sound, as in ta. Or saw is represented by the letter S. And this letter always makes the sound S or saw, as in saksa. As you can see, when the students hear words like gat, gao, or cup, for examples, they already know that this word has the letter K in there, the letter G in there. What else can make the sound G besides the letter G? I saw G. So that's why Khmer language has what we call a one-to-one correspondence, which means the letters don't really have multiple sounds or make multiple sounds. Now, let us compare this to English. Unlike Khmer, English doesn't have a one-to-one correspondence between letters and sounds, or at least they lack that. For example, let's look at the sound E, like in the word see. This sound can be spelled in many different ways. For example, the word see, the word tea, the word me, field, receive all have the sound E, but the way they are spelled is not the same. This variety can make spelling and pronunciation very challenging for learners of English language. And another example is how the same letter can represent different sounds. Take the letter A, for instance. Now, if you look at the letter A, the sound of the letter A should be A, but that's not the case in words like cat. Cat is pronounced as cat, not cat or Kate, right? Cake is pronounced as cake because it has the A sound now. It's not cake, right? It's the A sound now, so it's pronounced as cake. And then father, so now A has the R sound, the R sound. So now father is pronounced as father, not father, not feather. And then you have the sound, as in about, right? So it's not about, it's not about, it's about, almost silent. Okay, so this lack of consistency in English is why learners need to focus on one sound at a time and learn the different ways it can be spelled. The question is how can and should teachers introduce one sound at a time to students? There are many ways you can go about doing this. So let's just say that you want to introduce the sound as you can see in the phonetic symbol there. That symbol represents the sound You want to introduce that sound to students. So you as a teacher can either model the sound for students to hear, play the audio for students to listen to, or show the phonetic symbol that represents the sound. That is if you want to teach the words with phonetic symbols. Then you can give students a list of words that contain the sound So words like bird, word, worm, worth, curl, herd, first, hurt, dirt, etc. all contain the sound. You can then ask students to identify a letter that always appears in each of those words, and in this case we can see the letter R. So now you can tell students that the letter R is always in the spelling of any words that have the sound This is because if you look closely at those words, you will see that the sound ER isn't just formed with ER, right? The sound isn't just formed with ER. You can see IR in bird. You can see UR in curl. You can see AR in hurt. This is because English lacks a one-to-one correspondence. Now, if you prefer phonetic symbols, that is also fine too. And it helps students see that whenever that symbol appears, they produce the sound despite the spelling of the word. You can also ask them to repeat after you. Repeat after the audio until they can produce the right sound if you don't use phonetic symbols. Working with one sound at a time is considered appropriate for students and teachers, but there are cases where two sounds are so similar or so confusing that we can't ignore. In this case, we can introduce to students two sounds that are similar or confusing at the same time. You can use minimal pairs activity to do so by giving them a pair of words that are very similar in sounds but different in spelling. to help them become more familiar and become aware that certain sounds are different. So let's say you want to teach the sound of SH and CH, right? The sound of SH has the sound sh, sh, and the sound of CH has the sound ch, right? To students. What you can do is give them a list of pairs of words containing the two sounds. For example, we have ship and chip, sherry and cherry, cash and catch, etc. You can let students listen to different sounds of each pair and practice, listen to your own model, or use phonetic symbols to help them recognize the sounds. But you must remember though that if students can hear the difference but are unable to produce the sound, or they simply can't hear the difference at all because of where they are from or because of their native tongue or language, you must step in and demonstrate physically how each sound is produced to either individual students or as a whole class. If they don't have problems producing the sounds at all, you can work on new sounds or do some meaningful practices, meaningful repetitions instead on producing the same sound whenever you come across that sound. But again, if students can't produce, you must make sure that you allow them chances to listen to the sounds or work on identifying the sounds in activities like listen and choose, like the one shown in our book here. You say a sentence containing the two sounds. Small shops or chops are often expensive. And then students will have to choose the words they hear from you or from the audio. This is to help them recognize the difference in the two sounds once again. Apart from practicing the sounds using separate words, teachers can help students practice the sounds of the words in phrases or even sentences instead. So instead of asking them to repeat words like cheap, chair, cheese, etc., you ask them to read a phrase or a sentence that contains the word with the target sound that you are teaching. For example, instead of saying cheap, they say it's very cheap. Instead of saying cheat, you ask them to say you cheat, etc. Now this can help them prepare for a communicative task where they actually have to say the words in longer sentences or phrases later on. In this type of task, students have to speak and they have to use the words containing the target sound, as you can see here. The prompted question is, how much do you enjoy doing the activities below? And the student may say, I enjoy playing chess very much. The students produce the sound of ch, 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 multiple times in their longer phrases or sentences. Again, everybody, if you feel like students are unable to produce the sound or the target sound that you are teaching after so many practices, you have no choice but to help them individually by showing them physically how the sound is made. So in the end, focusing on one specific sound at a time or contrasting two sounds that are similar have a lot of benefits for not just students but also for teachers alike in pronunciation, teaching, and learning. Number one, students get to know and beware of the differences between sounds they hear. They can identify confusing sounds because sometimes where they are from or their first language interferes a lot with what they can hear and what they can say, the ability to produce the actual sounds. It also helps teachers too. By focusing on one sound at a time, teachers can easily manage the sound they want to teach and can explore the one sound in various activities. They have a chance to study the sound if they aren't comfortable with the sounds themselves. Plus, We don't need phonetic symbols for this kind of practice at all. Speaking of phonetic symbols, and for teachers who love using phonetic symbols to teach pronunciation, they can do so too. And there are many activities for this. There are many ways teachers can teach sounds using this phonetic chart. The first thing you should do, though, is to make sure that your students are aware of the sounds of each symbol, and you are too. Yes, it is a lot to focus on at the same time, and so it can be a bit overwhelming for students and teachers, especially for those who aren't familiar with this chart yet. But you can learn the symbols yourselves or play the recording of each sound instead in the chart and let students listen and repeat. Better yet, you can have words underneath each symbol. And you can teach students inductively by having them try to work out the sound of each symbol by looking at the word underneath it. For example, the word read, so the symbol must have the sound E in there. Remember though, EA isn't the only way to make the sound E, right? So yeah, so these words underneath each symbol can help not just the students but also you, right? Especially when you are not familiar or you don't remember the sounds of these symbols. And once students are familiar with the sounds of the symbol, teachers can point to each square of the chart and ask students to produce the sound instead. Or the teachers can use the symbols to help students produce a specific sound of a word. For example, you want your students to produce the sound of the word shop. Instead of saying the sound shop to them, you point to 3 different symbols on the chart. You point to the sh sound as in short. I hope you can see that. The sound as in America. Sound as in America, and the p sound as in pig. Put them together, you have up, shop, right? I know it sounds weird, but that's how it works. Then again, students and teachers should be quite familiar with the symbols to make this work. To make this even more challenging, the teachers can call out the sound or the word, and students have to be the one pointing to the correct symbol. If they don't point to the right symbol of the sound, then you must step in and correct them. Besides teaching pronunciation from the phonetic chart directly, there are other activities that make use of the phonetic symbols too. There is what we call a bingo activity, which I'm sure you know how it works, except this time we use phonetic scripts or phonetic symbols for materials. Since we focus on phonetic sounds with symbols, we should not use normal spelled words, but phonetic scripts instead, as you can see in the examples. Instead of having the word cat spelled C-A-T on the bingo card, you have the phonetic script of the word cat. And when you call out the word, students have to identify which phonetic script represents the word cat that they, cat that they hear. Tongue twisters activity is a popular one too for pronunciation practice. I'm sure you're all aware of that. It is when a sentence having many words with the same pronunciation and students are challenged to read as fast as they can without making mistakes. This is to make their tongue more flexible and accustomed to making specific sounds. Right, she sells seashells on the seashore. Another one is odd man out activity. This also helps too. Again, we use phonetic scripts, not what we call orthography or normal spelled words if you want, since we are working with phonetic symbols, of course. For example, words like bit, sit, fit, and fet. Which one of these 4 has the strangest sound? Except when students are looking at these, they are not looking at normal spelled words. Students figure out this with phonetic scripts of these 4 words. Now that we have explored how teachers can work with sounds in pronunciation teaching, let's move on to how we can work with stress. Firstly, what does stress refer to in pronunciation and what importance does it give? Stress refers to the emphasis that is either placed on a specific syllable in a word, such as present as a noun where the first syllable is stressed, or present as a verb where the second syllable is stressed. The emphasis could be on a specific word in phrases such as hard work, fast food. The emphasis could be placed on a word in a sentence. For example, I didn't take it, which means someone else took it, when you stress on the letter I in that sentence. Or in the same sentence, you say, I didn't take it, which means I borrowed it, or I stole it, when you stress on the word take in that same sentence. So therefore, stress can be achieved by making the syllable or the word louder, a longer or even higher pitch to convey specific meaning or idea, which is quite important in communication especially. So what can teachers do to help students work with stress? First and foremost, the most common way we can do this is by simply marking or underlining the stress syllables in the words that we teach students. For example, amazing. So maze, the second syllable, is underlined. Interesting, the first syllable is underlined. Begin, the second syllable is underlined to show the students where the stress is in the word and tell them that they should sound a bit louder with that syllable in that word. Or another way is to show them the weak vowel sounds in words. We can start by drawing their attention to what we call schwa, which means unstressed sounds or sounds that are almost unheard or silent in a word. So let's explore some examples to see what we really mean by silent sounds. So let's look at the sound again, shown the phonetic symbol A upside down. It has the sound this sound is usually silent when it appears in a word. For example, you can try pronouncing all of these words yourselves just to see, whether it's true or not. We have the word banana, right? Banana. So the first and last syllables are schwa, which means they are almost unheard or silent. Okay, banana. Okay, right. And then we have the next word, which is photograph. Photograph. So t. The second syllable is schwa, which means it's almost unheard, right? So photograph. Okay, and then we have another word, comfortable. So the second and third syllables are schwa, which means we don't usually pronounce them or they are silent. We don't say comfortable, right? Okay, we say comfortable. So forte is schwa. Clueless, right? Clueless, not clueless, by the way. Clueless. Okay, clueless. The second syllable is schwa, which means they are almost unheard, right? Clueless. Another way to work with stress is to work with stress in longer phrases. There's one activity that suggests a good way to work with stress in longer phrases, so let's explore this activity all together to see how it works and how students can learn stress in longer phrases through this activity. In this game, you will match pairs of phrases that have the same stress pattern. Your goal is to find correct pairs and encircle the fish. Each fish represents a phrase, and when you correctly match phrases, you'll catch the fish by fully encircling it with lines. I know it's a little bit hard to understand, but let's just go together here. To match the phrases together, we need to look at the stress pattern. So each phrase has a stress pattern. Content words like nouns and verbs are stressed and counted. For example, in the phrase don't stop, stop is stressed because it is a content word, while don't is a function word. In I've seen it, Seen and it are stressed, while I is a function word here. So understanding where the stress falls is crucial for matching the phrases together. And the stress in each phrase is also important for when students have to say the phrases or read the phrases with the correct stress at the end of this game. So here is the game board. Each phrase has a fish next to it. Your task is to identify the stress patterns of each phrase and match phrases together that have the same stress patterns. Now, students should listen carefully to the phrases and figure out which ones have the same stress pattern. For example, you may say, look and wait. Both have one stressed syllable, and so they form a match. Try to match all the phrases in the same way. Once you have identified the matching phrases, draw a line connecting them. When the fish is completely surrounded by lines, it means it is caught. Keep matching phrases until all the fish are caught. So let's look at some example matches. Look and wait both have one stressed syllable, so they are a pair. Similarly, I can't believe it and she tried to call you. Both have three stressed syllables and can be matched. After you've matched the pairs, say the phrases aloud. This will help you practice the stress patterns. Pay attention to where the stress falls as you listen to students say these phrases. So let's look at example matches that you may hear students say in this activity. I can't believe it has three stressed words: can't, believe, and it. So when students read, they have to speak louder on those three words in that sentence. I can't believe it. Students should continue until you feel like they are able to sound higher or lower, just right. Just enough, just acceptable enough for you to move on. Besides working with stress in longer phrases, teachers can help students work with stress in long sentences. Stress in sentences is very important, especially in communication, because they can convey a specific meaning. So let's explore the activity in our book here, where we help students work with special stress in a real life situation. So let's just pretend that all of you are students and I'm your teacher now. We are working on this activity together. So we are going to listen to a conversation between a waiter and a customer. Pay attention to the words that are stressed. When you hear the stressed words, try to understand why they are stressed. Is it because the customer is correcting something or emphasizing a detail? After listening, we'll underline the stressed words together and discuss why those words were stressed. Here's a part of the conversation. Listen carefully again and underline the words that are stressed. For example, in the first part, the customer corrects the waiter's mistake about the sandwich, so the word chicken is stressed. Now listen to the next part, where the customer asks for a large pizza, so large is stressed to correct the order. As you can see, the stress changes based on the situation. When a mistake is being corrected, the stressed word shows what the customer wants to emphasize. Stress in English is often used to highlight what's important or to show disagreement or even correction. Okay, so you may have students now practice saying these lines with the correct stress over and over again to see whether they have made the correct sound when they say that specific sentence. To further elaborate on this, let us take a look at a different sentence. I lent my sister £10 for a train ticket. If we change the stress, the meaning changes too. So let's try stressing different words in this same sentence. So if we stress on the word lent, it sounds like we did not give her the money for the train ticket, or you mean that you only gave her 10 pounds and nothing else. Okay, so it may sound like this. I lent my sister 10 pounds for a train ticket, which means you either, sound like you did not give her any money, or you did not give her anything else besides the 10 pound, right? Okay. I lent my sister 10 pounds for a train ticket, which means you don't give her anything else. You did not give her anything else. Or if we stress on the very last two words, last week, it sounds like you emphasize on the time you lent your sister money, right? So it may sound like, I lent my sister 10 pounds for a train last week, right? I lent my sister 10 pounds for a train last week. Okay, I lent my sister 10 pounds for a train ticket last week, which means you want to emphasize to whoever you're talking to that last week was the time you lent your sister money. We know that stress plays a key role in understanding and in speaking English clearly. So as teachers, we need to introduce stress in various ways to suit different learners. One of the ways to do it is to teach stress by having students read aloud a passage that you've chosen. The focus should be on identifying which words take the main stress in each phrase or sentence. Once the students are familiar with the stress patterns, have them read the text aloud once again, paying close attention to how they apply the stress patterns, and this should help them connect the written form with correct spoken intonation. Another effective method, especially with dialogues, is to have students perform them, much like a theater director would guide actors, right? This approach helps students focus on how stress influences intonation and meaning. Assign different roles in the dialogue and have students practice with varying stress on keywords. You can guide them to use the correct intonation to make the dialogue sound a little bit more natural, just as they would do in real life conversations, right? If they were to do this in real life. And then another way is to stress the, importance of intonation, which, stress is tied to intonation, which is how we use pitch to convey meaning, right? So together, stress and intonation form a rhythm or, some sort of melody in speeches. Stress gives emphasis to important words, while intonation can show emotions, signals for questions, or even indicate a statement. Okay, and as teacher, it is important to help students understand this connection and teach them how to use both in conversation. And then we have another way of doing this, which is to use rods representing different words in sentence. The highlighted rod shows where students need to speak a little louder. Okay, so as you can see in the picture here, I'll ring you next week. Okay, which means, to emphasize on time, or I will ring you next week, which means, I'm not going to see you, I'm not going to meet you, I will ring you. If you want to focus on stress in words, have students categorize words that have the same stress pattern. For example, they have to, put words with stress on the third syllables together and words with the stress on the second syllable together, as in information, consultation, aggravation, right? So stress is on the third syllable of these words. And then discovery, right? Discovery. So stress on the word cough. Recovery, acknowledge. So all of these stresses are on the second syllable of all of these words, so they should be put together. Another area of pronunciation teaching is working with intonation. So what does intonation refer to exactly? Intonation refers to the rise and fall of the voice. This is similar to stress, except stress is about the rise and fall in specific words. Intonation plays an even more important role than stress does in communication, especially by conveying not just meaning, but many types of emotion: happy, sad, surprise, doubt, etc. They can also convey questions and statements too when you have the right intonation in your speech. So let's see how important intonation is in communication by using the word yes in different tone. So we have neutral, as in yes, yes, right? Yes. Uncertainty would be rising intonation, which means yes, right? You're not sure, and then you're trying yes. And then sarcasm, as in, falling intonation, would be yes, as in you're not believing it, but you're saying yes, right? Yes. Enthusiasm, kind of bit, you know, enthusiastic about it. So yes, yes, right? So these are the, various ways that intonations can convey in your speech. And then, as teachers, the tone of your voice also comes from the expression you make. So sometimes facial expressions actually help students recognize which tone is for which emotion. Once they get the hang of which tone is for which emotion, you can have them ask each other yes/no questions, and to each other, and they try to attempt to use different tones, different intonation to convey their own emotion through their answers, right? Okay, and with intonation comes facial expressions. Now, instead of using words, you can use the hum sound, right? As in this picture here, to tell students that different intonation, rising, uh, falling, indicate different types of type of emotion, right? Type of idea. So you can say a as in right, or mm-hmm, right, as in okay, right. So which one, when they hear a person sound a specific sound, does the person want to agree with you? Does the person want to agree but disagree? Does the person display some sort of uh, a lack of interest or boredom, right? Yeah, depending on the kind of sound that they hear. But we shouldn't forget, though, everybody, that we discussed that in the last week. We should not forget that intonation is probably the hardest part of pronunciation teaching. So the aim here isn't to really get students to remember what tone is for what emotion, but rather to help them become aware that in English, the tone you hear, whether up, down, neutral, conveys a specific meaning, and that helps them understand the intention behind a speaker. So here are some more ways you can help students work with intonation, and that is to use arrow indicating where they should raise their voice or lower their voice. For example, I think so, right? So the arrow shows think as in up, so the students see that and they will have to raise their voice at the word think, right? I think so. Or have them listen to native speaker say certain phrases and let them decide or identify whether they hear a lower or higher intonation. And once they have done that, have them try to mimic, to repeat, to copy, the speaker using the same intonation. There are other ways too. We can do the teach intonation, and that is to use arrows, not just arrows, but with arm movement. Instead of drawing the arrows, you use your arm to indicate that as you speak. So you can say, I think. So the arm up, I think so. Okay, or humming the tune, as in mm-hmm, mm-hmm, right? Or just say in an exaggerated way to show students that you really showed a specific emotion and that intonation matters. Or you can put all three together. The last way of teaching intonation is a little bit complicated, and I personally think that it's pretty time consuming if you ask me, but it's probably the most effective one out of all of these. It's to teach students intonation with sound waves. So the key here is to have some sort of recording device or computer, and students first listen to a sentence said by a native speaker, and then they attempt to copy the exact sound and intonation and then record it. And then the computer will tell them exactly whether their speech is exactly the same as the native speaker or not, right? Whether their intonation, their sound, their pronunciation match that of the native speaker or not. It can tell students what they say wrong and give them a chance to try again until it matches. So it's pretty useful if you ask me, but it takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort to prepare audios and stuff. Yeah, you have to actually dedicate a whole class session for that if you want to go with, sound waves when it comes to teaching intonation. In pronunciation teaching, sounds and spellings are connected because sounds help us spell a word, and the spelling of a word comes from sounds too. What makes it difficult is that English doesn't have a one-to-one correspondence between sounds and letters, just as we discussed earlier, or at least it lacks that. So it is quite important that we help students deal with letters that produce multiple sounds, as suggested in this activity right here. Have students listen to a recording of a list of words containing the same letters that produce different sounds. In this case, we have OU. So we have could, and then instead of country, it's country. So now we have another sound for OU. And then foul, right? Another sound for OU. Ground, house, out, round, and then rough, which is a completely different sound for the same letters OU. So students should be aware that the same two letters could produce multiple sounds. And therefore it affects their spelling, right? It affects their spelling. Or you can, work on spelling instead. You have them look at spelling of words that produce specific sounds, for example, like sh, right? Shop, sh, okay? Shop sounds also appear when the word is spelled with ti or ci plus vowel, right? So it's not just sh, sh all the time that produces sh sound. It's ti or ci with vowel also produce the sh sound. So things like education, right? Initial, right? Musician, delicious, right? All of these produce the sh sound too. It's not just sh alone, right? And all these sorts of things. Sometimes we should help students notice sound and spelling by looking at the patterns in which the words are spelled. So for example, if you look at this list, you will see, column A and B consisting of words starting with the letter C, but they don't pronounce the same. So C in general has the k sound, right? K sound, but not all the time. So you can help students by letting them see the rules in which they are spelled, and if they are spelled that way, what sound does it make, right? So for example, in this case, we see that the letter C-I-Y after the letter C makes the S sound. C makes the S sound, as in center, certain, nice, fence, right? City, cycle, and all these sorts of things. And then when you see A-U-O-R after the letter C, then C now makes the K sound, right? As in cap, can, cup, coffee, crack, coin, call, cafe. Okay, this kind of inductive approach helps them know that sounds and spellings are not always random. Okay, sometimes there are some sort of rules or patterns that they can remember that can help them identify the sound and spelling of that word. So we have come to the last part of our part 2 here, and that is connected speech and fluency. So knowing and saying individual words and sounds isn't enough, as I wrote it here. In English, sounds become connected when they come in contact with one another or with other sounds in that same sentence. So in order to help students with connected sounds, we, should follow these 3 stages. So in the first stage, we give students a sentence in isolation, okay, which means you say, I am going to see him tomorrow. So this sentence has sound in isolation, and then you give them a connected speech, which most native speakers or in daily communication will sound like, right? So you say, I'm gonna see him tomorrow. I'm gonna see him tomorrow. Okay, and then we ask them a connected speech version of, and then we, ask them how the speech is connected, Okay, what difference in sounds do they hear in the connected speech version? What sound is reduced? What sound is combined? What sound is dropped, right? Okay, and then in stage 2, we have them instead listen to a connected speech version of the same sentence, of a sentence, but we ask them to write a grammatically correct form of that sentence. So you say, do you want a coffee? right? As in connected speech, you want a coffee, and then they have to rewrite that what they hear using the correctly grammatical version of it. So it would be, do you want a coffee? That's what you expect them to write after listening to your connected speech. And last but not least is a production. Obviously, you have to let them actually say the words in a connected speech way. So yeah, to help them realize that in a real life context, actually, students need, to beware of how in actuality people use English, right? And that is when they come in contact, they don't just use it in separate words, right? They have to say it in a connected way. So if students are able to reach a level where they can connect sounds together in a sense, their fluency also comes along with it. So it's important to help them become aware of the way speaking is actually, shown to them, displayed to them in real life, because this way of speaking is what actually happens in an authentic context. And so we have come to the end of our teaching pronunciation lesson now. It's a bit long, but I hope that you can, watch this in separations instead of sitting in one go.